painter and a wonderful colorist, and so it's like magic to live here. And we are very messy, and I don't know if the rest of you guys know that we have a circus, Fern Street Circus it's called, and so Fern Street Circus also lives here. Joan of Arc doll that probably was made for, I would guess, a Catholic parish carnival. Because when I was a little girl, these were the kind of dolls that you would have at the cakewalk, and you would win them when you had, da, 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 and you sit down and you'd win one of these little dolls. And they usually had ball gowns on, but some Catholic mother got really excited about Joan of Arc and made a Joan of Arc. And so, hi, Alessandra. And then the other, I'm really currently interested in the baby Krishna, who I understand appears to old women in his baby form rather than his adult form. And then of course there's Venus of Willendorf, and that was my mother's Christ that she got on her wedding day. So anyway, sometimes you need an altar, and
Do they inspire you in the art making process?
Well, they just keep me protected. I don't know. Yeah, they do. And see, because Joan is the subject of that artwork that I submitted for your booth. And so I'm kind of deconstructing her. I don't know if, she's pleased that I'm doing that. But, when you were raised in a faith that you had to step away from, you never really step away from it all the way. So that's kind of the current thing I'm doing. Alessandra, you're here now. Also out there made out of papasan chairs, sort of leaning against the fence. But this is now our chandelier for eating outdoors. So it's just, this is what I would tell you is that these are in these frames not because I always make work to be in these kind of frames. It's I was going to LACMA to see the 24-Hour Clock movie, and these were, I took a detour through Venice Beach, and these were stacked on the sidewalk. So, I thought, hey, these were made for me, and now I'll make some art that goes in them. So this art could have ended up on plywood like that piece, which is my go-to material, but in this case, I had these, so I thought this will be cool, and I put them in. But like my next work is going to be on these trellises from Home Depot and on plywood, and so
you use door skin usually.
Yeah, and I had those cut up to use for drawing boards for students, but I'm no longer using them. So okay, and that's kind of been the story of my life. Is I'm sort of an insider-outsider artist. With an MFA, I've always sort of lived a life of not a lot of money, and I prefer, in a way, the resonance of using materials that already had a life. But these pieces are my own words here and my own titles here, but they are all borrowings from an old French illuminated manuscript. So what I have done is strip them down, zoom in, crop, alter slightly, but I'm perfectly overt about saying these are not original compositions. These are borrowings. Voice hearing, and that it's not really a pathology to hear voices, because I happen to hear voices, and I'm also open about that. I think it's only a pathology if you think it's coming out of the TV set or, somebody on the ceiling. But if it's the voice of inspiration that comes to you, as I think in the case of Joan of Arc it was, then what's wrong with it? We're now in an era of neurodiversity, and so it's also a little bit. It's definitely got a feminist angle in that Joan definitely suffered for having tried to move into the world of men and help the king out. You guys all know the story of Joan of Arc? She was like a very impoverished, burned at the stake. And I deliberately didn't want to portray her actually suffering. So here she's getting tied, but she's, And she's generally saying, this is really not the best deal in the world, is it? And these are like, my voices tell me what she ought to have been saying, unlike, I don't claim to be a historian. There's a lot of great history that's been done about her. But I'm just being audacious the way an artist can, adding a few of my own thoughts. Here's the deal. I was making zines before zines were cool. And this was my MFA thesis book for UCSD. And I was interested in a lot of different sad sack saints, not just Joan of Arc. But in my old age, now that I'm an old lady and I can do whatever I want, I'm revisiting some of the themes in this. When I made this comic book and submitted it for my MFA at UCSD, they said, "And you expect us to take this seriously?" And I said, "Well, yes, well, no." A little bit like Andy Warhol. But it featured personalities like Babette Mangold and Jean-Pierre Gorin, some of the professors, and it featured Joan of Arc throughout, Theodore Dreyer's movie about Joan of Arc, but also Marjorie Camp, Simone Weil, or Simone Weil, as you might read it if you were taking the Anglo pronunciation. Here, see, this is all Joan of Arc. She was called La Pucelle, which means the maid, but also means the little whore, or the kitchen pump. I always want to push them more towards their fleshy, real, funny people with desires.
Yes.
That's why I like the baby Krishna, because he was always getting into trouble because he had his desires unchecked, and he was eating out the butter out of the butter urn, and he was getting in trouble. And so I'm not any longer a worshipful Catholic, but I still need a spirituality in my life and some idea of a higher power. And for me, I want it to be fully bawdy and lusty and troublesome.